Many claimed that Texas was back following a 10-4 record, Big 12 championship game appearance, and Sugar Bowl win over Georgia following 2018. The program took a step back, but Tom Herman is reloading with a new offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, new schemes on both sides of the ball to get Texas back in 2020. We got Steve Hillwick on the line, Underdog Dynasty, Hustle Belt. He also is a graduate at the University of Texas, worked there for quite a long time in regards to both print media and obviously on screen. Steve, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. It's been a while since I've talked college football. The season ended quite a long time ago, and there's a lot of uncertainty going into 2020, but we're remaining optimistic for the moment.
Absolutely. It seems to change to a certain extent day by day, but it's getting clearer as both conferences and individual institutions are making decisions about getting athletes back on campus. But it's a slow turn, that's for sure. Let's look at Texas. 8-5, impressive bowl win against Utah. It seemed like the team that we should have seen all season finally showed up in that Alamo blowout of Utah. 7 starters back on offense. Maybe we start there with Mike Yurcich now taking controls as the coordinator as Tom Herman tries to give Sam Ehlinger the opportunity to go out with a bang.
Yes, I think that Tom Herman's kind of looking at the LSU Joe Brady model with Joe Burrow and trying to give Sam Ehlinger a new coordinator that could revitalize his game senior year. Not that Sam Ehlinger is not a great quarterback already, because he's probably one of the top 10 in college football right now. When you look at his throwing ability, which has improved over the years, he had a career high 65% completion rate last year. And he's a tremendous rusher too. He didn't quite have the number of rushing touchdowns. He had a ridiculous 16 rushing touchdowns in 2018. Didn't quite have that number last year, but still carried the load for the offense, had more rushing attempts than anyone else. And now I think they want to bring Yurcich in to help mentor Ehlinger in this senior year. He worked with a lot of great quarterbacks at Ohio State. When you just look at the quarterback room that they've had over the past couple of years, and Justin Fields made a lot of development last year from when you look at the limited time he played at Georgia to when he was a Heisman candidate last year for Ohio State. So I think it was very important to give Ehlinger that, because there was a lot of trust lost in Tim Beck over the years, a lot of blame put on Tim Beck for losing some of the games. And he didn't really come into Texas with as great of terms with losing that game to Clemson 31-0 when he was first hired. And so that caused Texas fans to be off on him. I mean, he did a lot of great things for the program, but I think Tom Herman decided it was time for change. I think Tom Herman was looking at those recruiting classes that Texas was hauling in during his tenure and saying, why are we only getting 7, 8, 10 wins a year and not more? And I think he wants to overhaul the entire program in the coordinator sense, which he also hired a new defensive coordinator. But right now, sticking with the offense, this will be a very big year for the program because this is Sam Ehlinger's senior year. You don't get quarterback talents like this too often. He's Texas's best quarterback that they've had since Colt McCoy. So it's important to capitalize this year and try to make a run at a Big 12 at all costs necessary, because this is a year that Oklahoma loses Jalen Hurts. I know we talk about the Sooners losing their Heisman candidate quarterback every year and a new one comes up. So we don't know too much about Spencer Rattler and the Sooners right now. But I think that this Texas team, with the amount of returning starters that they have and a great quarterback leading the offense, I think that they have all the potential to be, they're going to be a top 3 team in the Big 12. I think they have all the potential to at least make a run at Arlington in December.
What we've seen over the last few years is that Ehlinger's had to carry this offense much more than any quarterback should for what is supposed to be an elite team. He's had plenty of help on the offense. Colin Johnson, one of my favorites to watch over the last few years. Devin Duvernay have posted big numbers, but they're both gone. The offensive line hasn't been necessarily up to standards, especially in the running game, and the running game in particular has not given much of a compliment to Ehlinger's own running and opening up the passing game. So what do we have coming back that you're excited about?
I'm actually excited about the running game. I think this will be one of the best running games we've seen in years at Texas. I mean, they had that one season where Deontay Foreman won the Doak Walker Award in 2016 by pretty much carrying the entire offense. But this year, I really like how the rushing game will complement Sam Ehlinger in terms of the running backs. Keontae Ingram missed several games last year. He was injured, but I was really impressed with him late in the season. He did a lot of great things against Utah. He had a long touchdown run in that game. He played really well against Kansas State and Texas Tech and some of those late games down the season line. I was really impressed with Ingram's rushing ability, and I think he has become one of the more underrated running backs in the conference just because Ehlinger is getting a lot of the credit. He has most of the rushing attempts, but Ingram led the team in yards last year, and I think he's a really explosive running back off the line of scrimmage. I really like what I saw from him. In terms of a backup running back, I think they will still use Roschon Johnson. If you remember last year, Roschon Johnson was a backup quarterback who was a freshman. They intended to redshirt him, but when all the running backs on the team got hurt, Roschon Johnson stepped in, and he did pretty decent at the running back position. He decided to burn his red shirt to help the team in that area, and I thought his contributions were great. So I think he would be a good secondary back going forward for Texas. I remember last year when we were talking a season preview for Texas, I thought that the running back of the future was going to be a 5-star recruit, Jordan Whittington, and it appears that they're going to – Whittington got hurt after the Louisiana Tech game last year, so he never really got a chance to have a freshman campaign. But it looks like that they are switching him to a slot receiver position, so he will not contribute as much to the rushing game. But I think he's someone that you can plug in several places in the offense and keep Texas versatile there. But I think this running game is going to be pretty good this year, and especially when you combine that with someone who I think has a chance to make the All-American team as a lineman, and that is left tackle Samuel Cosme. He's 6'7", over 300 pounds. We saw his athletic ability last year against West Virginia when they lined him up for a screen pass, and he caught a 10 to 12-yard touchdown against the Mountaineers. And I think Cosme is one of the best tackles in all of college football, and he was all Big 12 last year, and he should really help bolster Texas's running game this year. Having a great lineman like that helps. And then another good lineman that they have is Derek Kerstetter. He'll either play right tackle or center, depending on if they want to move him to center. He's played right tackle the past couple years, and having good veteran linemen is really important, I think, to the running game, because we've seen years where Texas didn't have as good linemen or developing, and like 2017, and the running game took a hit back then.
About 1,500 yards rushing between Ingram and Johnson, 5.5 yards per carry, 14 touchdowns on the ground, 18 total, as both got pretty involved in the passing game from the backfield. Johnson with 23 receptions, Ingram with 29. And I mentioned Devin Duvernay with 106 catches last year, but for some reason, Colin Johnson always sticks out as the guy who made huge catches. He was nicked up last year with only 38 catches, but tremendous career out of Colin Johnson. But Devin Duvernay, eye-popping stats for Texas last year on offense. So at wide receiver, who do we have? Anybody that's caught your eye that you're looking to have a big breakout?
My breakout prediction this year will be Jake Smith. He was a true freshman last year. He played a lot in the slot receiver, only had about 20 catches. He had 6 touchdowns, though. He made a lot of big plays. I first got to see him in person last year when they played Rice. I was really impressive with some of his route running ability from the slot. I think he has very good footwork for a wide receiver, and that will really help him down the line. Another wide receiver that they have that will line up on the outside is Brennan Eagles. If you remember Lil Jordan Humphrey from 2 years ago, big wide receiver, great at contested catching, and a pretty good deep threat too. And I think that's what Brennan Eagles was. I think he averaged around 16 yards per reception last year, and he's 6'5". He has a really good catch radius, and I think that he will be Sam Ehlinger's go-to on some of those deep jump ball throws that they've used to Lil Jordan Humphrey or Colin Johnson in past years, and those receivers have been really effective. I don't think Texas's receiving core will take as big of a hit as it might seem, losing 2 receivers to the NFL and Duvernay and Johnson, just because they seem to develop year after year. But last year it was who's going to step up now that Lil Jordan Humphrey's gone, and then Devin Duvernay goes out, has 106 receptions. They love to use him on those wide receiver screen routes. I think they could find another receiver to do that with this year. It could be Malcolm Epps, who's also projected to be one of the 3 starting wide receivers this year. Epps saw some playing time last year, but he'll have to step into a bigger role. I think these Texas receivers will have the talent to produce, and you won't see too much of a drop-off in the passing offense from last year.
Brendan Eagles, 38 receptions, as you mentioned, 16 yards per reception and 6 touchdowns. And as I recall, a big one against LSU in that game that the Longhorns almost pulled out 45-38. We got Steve Helwick on the line from Hustle Belt, also Underdog Dynasty. Steve, a graduate of the University of Texas, where he worked in digital media writing and also in television on campus, getting his view on Texas football as we typically do to get you set for the Longhorns in 2020. Looking at the defense, Chris Ash, another Tom Herman colleague from Ohio State days, comes in. He's got 9 starters back. My thoughts on the defense, Steve, was the defense that Herman inherited and that played for him in that first season was one of the better defenses we've seen in the Big 12 in the last 5 or 6 years. Unfortunately, most of the big playmakers off that defense moved on after that, and Herman fixed the offense to a certain extent, and then the defense wasn't quite as dominant as that first season, and they've leveled off a bit. But as I mentioned, 9 starters back.
Yes, the 2 that are missing are Malcolm Roach and Brandon Jones from last year, who were 2 of the best contributors. Brandon Jones went in the draft to Miami Dolphins, so he'll be needing to be replaced. But one thing that I really like about Texas is they've recruited so well out of the secondary. There's a lot of 4-star, 5-star prospects in the secondary, and I think this is their year to take a leap. Last year, Texas's secondary was so banged up that a lot of them only played 8-9 games. A lot of them missed great times in September and October, and I think that really hurt Texas's defense. You saw Kansas dropped, 47 points on Texas last year, and Carter Stanley had such a great game out of the pocket attacking Texas's backup secondary. So I think that having a healthy secondary this year is going to be really important because there are several safeties in there. Caden Stearns and BJ Foster, who are your everywhere players. They had a guy like this, PJ Locke, a couple years ago, who was a nickelback. And what Stearns and Foster do really well is they hit like linebackers in the backfield. Both of their tackles for loss numbers are really impressive, and they're very good coverage players too. I thought both of them operated in coverage better as freshmen than they did sophomores. And Caden Stearns had 4 interceptions as a freshman. He looked really good in that Georgia Sugar Bowl. I thought last year was going to be his breakout season, but injuries kind of prevented him from that. But this would be a very good year for Stearns to break out, especially with Brandon Jones leading that leadership role on the defense. So I think that Caden Stearns is going to be one big name to watch on the defense this year. And then I'll present one other name who I think will probably be a headliner in the 2021 draft, and that's Joseph Asai. Texas, under Chris Ash, may switch their 3-3-5 defense to a 4-3 or a 4-2-5, or something that Chris Ash is more familiar with running in the past at Rutgers or Ohio State. So I think Joseph Asai might switch from an outside linebacker to more of a defensive end role this year, but he's a tremendous pass rusher. He led the team in sacks last year. He gave nightmares to that Utah offensive line in the Alamo Bowl last year, had 3 sacks in that game. He was invading the Utes backfield, really helped stop Zach Moss in that game from gaining any momentum. And I said this a year ago when I'm watching the Sugar Bowl. Joseph Asai stepped up that game, and I thought last year was going to be a very great season for him, and it was. And I'm excited to see where his potential can climb heading into this year. And I think he's going to be Texas's best draft prospect on their team, and he'll rise on a lot of draft boards. So that's one key name to watch on defense because he will help Texas's pass rushing game to a magnificent level.
Asai definitely filled up the box score last year with 90 tackles. That led the team, 13.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks, 2 picks. So he's definitely a playmaker, and they will try to utilize him in the best possible position for him to do even more of that here in 2020. Steve, when we look at the schedule, South Florida and UTEP are the 2 games that should be in hand in the non-conference. Of course, the return trip in the home-and-home series with LSU going to Death Valley in week 2 is enormous. And then a bye week before a trip to Kansas State as Texas dives into Big 12 play. And then what is the truest championship in college football. Everybody plays everyone in the Big 12, all 9 teams. And so there you have it. You got to play everyone. And Texas has the 4 at home, 4 on the road, and the neutral site, of course, famously against Oklahoma.
An interesting schedule. I was wishing that Charlie Strong would still be the coach of South Florida for the opening, because I thought that'd be a very interesting, I'd say, rivalry matchup. Charlie Strong versus Texas. It would be an interesting revenge game to open the season. But Texas definitely has that game with South Florida's rebuilding effort. I think they're going to trend in the right direction with their coaching change. Getting assistance from Clemson is always good. And UTEP's going to be a win too. But I think that week 2 game against LSU is a very interesting matchup, because LSU, if you saw on draft day, it seemed like every other pick went to the Tigers. They had double-digit draft picks. And they're losing Joe Burrow. They're losing Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Justin Jefferson and so many guys that helped build that team, Grant Delpit. And I don't know what to expect of LSU next year. Are they going to go back to the 9-4, 8-5 team that they were for the first couple years of the playoff era? If you remember, from 2014 to 2017, LSU didn't make a single New Year's Six bowl. They were about a 9-win team playing Notre Dame and Citrus Bowls and Music City Bowls, and they played LSU in I forget, was it I think it was a Citrus Bowl or Music City Bowl in there also. Is that the LSU team we're going to get this year, or are we going to get just more of the 2018 team, which was a 10-3 team that won the Fiesta Bowl over UCF? I don't know what to expect of the Tigers next year with these massive departures, but what I do know is that Death Valley is one of the toughest places to play in America. So Texas can definitely expect a difficult atmosphere playing there. I'm guessing that's going to be a night game, has college game day potential. So I think that game is that's going to be a toss-up I'm going to throw on the schedule. After the bye week, I'd like to call Kansas State a trap game usually, but Tom Herman is so good when given time to prepare. In his Texas career, he is 3-1 coming off bye weeks. And if you've seen his bowl results, he's 3-0. And not only is he 3-0, he's been an underdog all 3 of his bowl games at Texas, and he has won each of them in dominating fashion. Missouri in 2017, he won 33-16 when people thought Drew Lock was going to put up numbers on that Texas defense. 2018, Texas team that kind of limped into a New Year's Six Bowl with a 9-4 record, going up against a Georgia team that people said was going to be in the playoffs. Texas beat him 28-21, but the scoreboard wasn't indicative of how lopsided the game seemed. And then last year, a Utah team that was a win away from making the college football playoff if they handled Oregon, and Texas goes up 17-0 over them and wins the game 38-10 in dominating fashion. So when you give Tom Herman time to prepare, he's most dangerous. And Texas hadn't won in Manhattan for a long time. I think before, was it 2018? And I think that he'll take care of business this year coming off the bye week there. The other main toss-up game I'll throw on there is the Oklahoma game. Just as I said before, Oklahoma is a tough team because they're so reliant and dependent on having a star quarterback. And we don't know much about Spencer Rattler at the moment. We know he was a top quarterback in his class. We know he was an Elite 11 MVP. We only saw him throw like 11 passes last year, and a lot of them were in garbage time against the FCS team Oklahoma played. The other ones were in garbage time when LSU demolished him in the Orange Bowl. So I think that the Oklahoma game is going to be another toss-up. And Oklahoma and Texas play each other within one possession seemingly every single season, no matter how good Oklahoma is, no matter how bad Texas is. That game always seems like a pick-em. I mean, Texas won in 2015 and 2018, despite Oklahoma making the playoffs both of those seasons. So that's always a difficult game to predict on the schedule. So I think they're going to split LSU and Oklahoma 1-1. Looking further at the schedule, they should be able to take care of teams like West Virginia, Texas Tech. I think Baylor's going to have a down year too after Matt Rule had a really impressive season with them last year, operating under Coach Aranda now and losing a lot of their star defensive linemen. I think Baylor's going to take a big step back this year, and I think that should be a win for Texas. and then Kansas. So you complete that 4 games after Oklahoma with West Virginia, Texas Tech, Baylor, and Kansas. I think all 4 of those should be wins for the Longhorns. The final 3 games of the season, those ones I can see Texas winning and losing all 3 of them. They could do 1-2 or 2-1 against that combo is what I would predict in TCU, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State. The main game to watch there is Oklahoma State on Black Friday. Oklahoma State has so much offensive talent with, I'd say, the best running back and the best wide receiver in college football in Chuba Hubbard and Tylan Wallace. So Oklahoma State's offense is going to be one of the most exciting ones to watch in college football this year. And I think Oklahoma State is right at the same level as Texas in a Big 12 contender that has a great chance of showing up in Arlington. It's can they get by Oklahoma?
So it sounds, when it's all added up, that you're looking at a 9-3 projection, and that's pretty dead on with what Vegas is projecting.
That sounds about right. And then possibly a Big 12 championship. 9-3 is definitely good enough to make a Big 12 championship. Texas did that in 2018. So, but I think Texas really needs that Oklahoma State game, because I think that would be a tiebreaker possibly to go to Arlington, because I think Texas and Oklahoma State are in that tier 2 right behind Oklahoma on the Big 12 right now. Of course, teams like Iowa State, who still has Matt Campbell, still has Brock Purdy there. Iowa State could be up there. And you never know about Kansas State. I think Kansas State shocked us all last year by going 8-5 when Kleiman's first season on campus. But I really think it's Texas and Oklahoma State for that second spot.
Well, every time I've got a call-in show, people love to talk about coaches on hot seats, and Tom Herman's brought up. I don't in particular think he's on the hot seat. I think if he has a down year this year, he could be on the hot seat for 2021, because then we're looking at 4 years in Austin and no Big 12 championships. It's that possible.
They have a New Year's Six bowl win, which I think, and that was definitely ahead of schedule, where I don't think anyone expected Tom Herman to bring that in a second year on campus. I know they still went 10-4, which isn't the most impressive record for a New Year's Six bowl win. And they also finished ranked last year. They beat Utah in a very convincing manner in San Antonio, 38-10. And I think those wins are what Texas really needs to build off for the future. They show up when it matters. They show up every single bowl season. It's now, can you carry over that success to the regular season and get yourself in position to make an even better bowl so you can show up for that one?
It is so, basically like 2 years behind Jim Harbaugh right now in regards to he's winning consistent. Well, he's not winning as consistently as Harbaugh is, but he needs to get past Oklahoma. He's obviously only at 3 shots. Harbaugh's had 5 against Ohio State, but that's what they're playing toward if this doesn't get done.
Yes, Texas, they're not quite at the level that the Jim Harbaugh Michigan's been yet, although Michigan has not won a New Year's Six bowl under Harbaugh. They won that Citrus Bowl in 2015, but they haven't won a New Year's Six bowl. So Herman has them in that regard, but 8-5 was not the record that Texas fans were hoping for last year, but still it's better than what we saw in the end of the Mac Brown era, the Charlie Strong era. So I don't think Herman has any place being on the hot seat right now, because he's a great recruiter too. He's getting some of the top guys in Texas, which wasn't happening in some of the previous years. I think that you have to be patient and you have to have realistic expectations. So many people, every team has had a peak in college football before, and so many people are trying to expect Texas to already be at the 2005 to 2009 pace, where that was just a golden era, glory years. I think it's more realistic to just hope for more 9-3 and 10-2 seasons, and hope that Herman makes a progress to get that leap that Ed Orgeron and LSU had last year, or that leap that Georgia seemed to be making when they hired Kirby Smart, getting off those 8-5 campaigns and going to 3 consecutive New Year's Six bowls. So Tom Herman's definitely not on the hot seat. I think it would have to take a 5-7, 6-7 season to get him there, but Texas is in good shape for the future. The fact that they can contend for a Big 12 championship every single year since 2018, which is something that we couldn't say about the Longhorns from 2011 to 2017, I think that's a very important step in the growth of the program.
So Texas fans aren't looking at Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and saying we should be one of them, and closer to home, looking at Oklahoma and saying we should be winning Big 12 championships consistently and not them.
I think that is fair. Oklahoma has been so established just so long, and I consider them one of the big four of college football. Is the only teams with multiple playoff appearances, and they all have three or more are Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, and Oklahoma. All of them will have won a national championship in the playoff era, except for Oklahoma. But I think it's reasonable for Texas to think that they can catch Oklahoma in some of these years, especially with all the close battles that they've put up with the Sooners over the years. Texas needs consistency, though. They need to be great with life after Sam Ehlinger. They need to continue recruiting and developing players. They're recruiting right now. It's more developing players. You're not seeing too many Texas Longhorns being called on draft day, and that's something that needs to change. So I think that Texas needs to focus more on player development in the future, and that will help them catch an Oklahoma and be a consistent Big 12 contender.
And the recruiting rankings are a double-edged sword when you're not winning up to expectations, because the fans can point to the recruiting rankings and say, man, this guy's doing the job. He's bringing in top 5 to 10 classes. We're going to get it done here soon. Or they can keep looking at, okay, we've got a roster comprised of top 5 to 10 classes. Oklahoma's right in that same range, and we might be out recruiting Oklahoma, but they own the conference. What's wrong? This guy's not the right guy. So you can look at that both ways, but obviously he's got to win at some point. All right, Steve. Steve Helwick, Underdog Dynasty, Hustle Belt, of course, covers Texas football on a regular basis because he's a graduate of the school and has been covering them for a long, long time, and joins us on a regular basis to break down the Horns. Steve, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Stay safe.